And I'd like to begin by reminding my colleagues that Canada is a vast country and an important, respected international player. And as such, it is an absolute necessity to have a government fleet of aircraft capable of transporting government ministers as they do their business on behalf of Canadians when necessary and when it's appropriate. Mr. Speaker, you'll find that virtually every country on the planet has a similar arrangement and similar equipment, including all of our G7 partners. And I think you'll find that our use of such aircraft is not only the most open and transparent of all these countries, but also the most necessary. Mr. Speaker, I do want to take a moment to thank the fine airmen and airwomen of the Royal Canadian Air Force for providing such dedicated service to Canadians. Our fleet, including 6 CC-144 Challenger aircraft and 5 Airbus CC-150 Polaris aircraft, is a crucial tool for the operations of the government. Even in our increasingly connected age, the human touch is still fundamental to doing business. It is simply indispensable. Representatives of the government on government business must travel around the country and the world, and our fleet, along with our flight crews, maintenance staff, and many support personnel, make sure they do so quickly, efficiently, and safely. We require capabilities that guarantee that we can rapidly reach every corner of our territory from coast to coast to coast. And this is precisely what these aircraft are bringing. Mr. Speaker, the dedicated VIP transport aircraft are operated by 2 squadrons, 437 Transport Squadron at CFB Trenton and the 412 Transport Squadron here in Ottawa. Mr. Speaker, both of these squadrons have a proud and storied history originating in the Second World War. The history of the 437 Squadron goes back to 1944, providing crucial transportation in Europe. Today, it operates the Airbus A310-300s, all designated as CC-150 Polaris aircraft. Only one of these, number 001, is operated in one might call a true VIP configuration, and for good reason. It has been used by Her Majesty the Queen and other members of the royal family. The other 4 Polarises are configured as normal airlines with cargo transport capabilities and air refueling capability. Mr. Speaker, 4112 Squadron can trace its origins back to the Battle of Britain and D-Day. It has a squadron of John Gillespie Magee, Jr., the RCAF pilot who wrote the poignant and memorable poem High Flight, only months before his death in 1941. 412 Squadron operates the CC-144 aircraft, the Bombardier Challenger business jets, in a VIP configuration from Ottawa's Macdonald-Cartier International Airport. These aircraft are twin-engine, long-range executive jets offering rapid air transportation over a range of up to 5,930 kilometers and a maximum speed of about 1,000 kilometers per hour. The Challengers can quickly deliver passengers almost anywhere in the world and can be used in a medical evacuation role when required. Mr. Speaker, it's important to understand that these aircraft are not sitting idle at a terminal just waiting for an urgent call to ferry a minister to a meeting. Mr. Speaker, these are working aircraft undertaking either training or other military work. For example, the 437 Squadron used its Polaris air-to-air refueling capabilities to support CF-18 fighters in operations over Libya. The Polaris were also used to ferry Canadian troops back and forth from Afghanistan. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to realize that there are strict rules in place for how these capabilities are used. Most fundamentally, for security reasons, the Prime Minister cannot use commercial aircraft. I think we all understand that and we all appreciate it. And I think Canadians would be somewhat concerned to see the Prime Minister flying on a commercial jet because of the public safety issues that surround him. In addition, the use of the fleet is strictly governed by Treasury Board guidelines. Government administrative aircraft are used to be used only for government purposes and government business when the flight is being made to a point where there is no commercial air service, when no space is available on a commercial air service, or when, because of difficulties in routings or timetables, substantial savings of essential time can be made by using administrative aircraft in place of commercial aircraft. Second point is official parties of some size need to travel together, and significant advantage can be gained by using a government aircraft. Thirdly, where security considerations render commercial travel impractical. And finally, when the aircraft is being used to transport visiting foreign dignitaries where it is deemed appropriate or is in the best interest of the Canadian government. The guidelines are quite clear. Ministers must thoroughly justify their use of government aircraft. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that our officials thoroughly review each and every application. We understand that Canadians don't have the option of government aircraft and therefore expect us to ensure the use of our fleet is under careful scrutiny. And the use of our RCAF fleet is a last resort. A last resort when commercial flights or other options simply won't permit the effective execution of government responsibilities. And when the Prime Minister uses RCAF aircraft on his trips overseas, it's by necessity. Again, I just want to remind members that when the Prime Minister uses government aircraft, the RCMP is first of all responsible for the safety and security of the Prime Minister, and their advice is he should not travel on commercial flights. As a standard practice, when the Prime Minister uses the Challenger to travel on Conservative Party business, the party reimburses the government the cost of an equivalent commercial flight. And finally, we have reduced the cost of ministerial travel on government aircraft by nearly 75% compared to when the Liberals held office. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is committed to a modern, flexible, and agile Canadian Armed Forces supported by a professional, multi-purpose Air Force. And it's always a great pleasure to talk about the great work of the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, and in this particular case, the Royal Canadian Air Force. Members in this House and Canadians across the country should be proud of their tireless dedication and their tremendous world-leading skills. And this pride should be equal either whether our airmen and airwomen are conducting surveillance at home to defend Canada and the North American continent, or quickly deploying a fighter jet capability at home or for overseas operations, or shuttling equipment and personnel deployed on operations, or, as in the case of this motion, transporting government representatives as they do the required business on behalf of all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his excellent discourse in terms of the men and women from our squadrons who do such amazing work for us and how we count on them. We certainly expect that we put their trust that they will keep the Prime Minister and his family safe. That is government business, and I certainly agree with him. And I'm glad to see that he said that there needs to be very clear rules around transporting. This isn't about saying the Prime Minister shouldn't be able to travel. He's the Prime Minister of the country. He has many, many concerns. So I'd like to ask him in terms of the issue of making sure that these rules are followed. When Mark Kinn was flown back and forth from Calgary on numerous flights, on the flight manifest, was he listed as a member of the Prime Minister's staff? Because he's clearly not. He's a party fundraiser. And these are the issues that we need to clarify. And this is why I think my honourable colleague will be certainly supporting this motion. We want to make sure that people are doing government business, but if people who are friends are being flown to baseball games, how do they get on the flight manifest? Because I'm sure the men and women of our Air Force are going to want to follow the rules. So was Mark Kinn listed as Prime Minister's staff, or was he listed as a fundraiser?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I said in my speech, there is clear rules of who can use government aircraft and how it's done. And there is, at times, when parties are with the Prime Minister or with the Minister, and there's a certain volume of people, that they will travel together and make a significant advantage can be gained by using a government aircraft on government business. Or in the case when the Prime Minister travels, when it is for personal, because he can't use commercial flights, he reimburses the Government of Canada at equivalent value for a commercial flight. So taxpayers aren't on the hook. If he'd been able to travel commercially, he would have reimbursed those dollars based on a commercial value back to the taxpayer. And for the safety of all Canadians who travel, I think it's in the best interest that the Prime Minister travel on government aircraft. So, we will continue to make sure that the rules are tight, that the rules are transparent, and that people that are traveling with the Prime Minister or on ministerial delegations using government aircraft are accounted for and well explained.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the land mass of Canada and the many different regions and the responsibility of the Prime Minister to actually travel into the regions, one can appreciate why it is that we have to provide aircraft support for the Prime Minister. My question for the member is related to the issue of safety. Because quite often when you make reference to the issue of safety, which most people might just think about, is the safety for the Prime Minister. But it actually goes beyond the safety of the Prime Minister in terms of flying on a commercial aircraft, for example. The issue in regards to having a Prime Minister on a commercial aircraft goes beyond just the personal safety of the Prime Minister. And I'm wondering if the member might want to provide comment on that aspect. This is something in which the RCMP, from what I understand, have also made significant comment on.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
And I want to thank my friend, Mr. Speaker, from Winnipeg North for his comments, and he's exactly right. I think that any Canadian would be somewhat concerned to see the Prime Minister get on a commercial flight, knowing that because of the world that we live in, the Prime Minister could be a target for those that hold ill will towards him or towards our country. And so everyone on that commercial flight would be at risk. And so for that reason, it is important that the Prime Minister is flown on government aircraft. And of course, all these aircraft are assets of DND and operated by the Royal Canadian Air Force. And so who better to provide security and protection to the Prime Minister of Canada when he's in the air than our own brave men and women who serve us in the Canadian Armed Forces. Yeah, yeah.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Oshawa.
Much, Mr. Speaker, and I wanted to take this opportunity while I was on my feet to thank the member from Selkirk Interlake. I know he's been strongly committed to working with Ukrainians in Canada, and he himself has spent tremendous time and commitment in flying back and forth on government aircraft to make sure that things are being done as best as they can for Ukrainian Canadians, and I want to thank him for that. My question today is because we are talking about government resources, and we didn't get an answer from the NDP. He is well aware that the leader of the opposition has been asked to sit before PROC to explain his plans to open up political branch offices across Canada that clearly are not for government uses. And I was wondering, with the smoke and mirrors and the opening statements that we've heard from our colleagues across the way, if he could actually clearly state his position and his understanding of appropriateness of funds for political offices being opened up across this country.
Parliamentary Secretary, we're almost out of time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank Parliamentary Secretary for Environment for his comments and his thanks on work in Ukraine. Ukraine's actually a good point in that I have traveled to Ukraine with the Prime Minister on government aircraft, and I've also traveled over there with the Minister of Foreign Affairs on commercial aircraft because that was the best option available for the size of delegation that we were taking. On the question of the hypocrisy that we see sometimes in this place, where we have the leader of the opposition having to appear now before the PROC committee to actually talk about how they're using government resources for political operations in Montreal and Regina is completely despicable, and one that I think that all Canadians are upset about, and that this motion today is about trying to turn the channel and distract away from the NDP's own shortcomings when they're using government taxpayer funds for political operations across this country.